Hi everybody. Um, just gonna make another video. I already made one today. I have a bit of time on my hands today. It's a public holiday and I don't have to go to uni today. So earlier this morning I made a video in Italian talking about what's needed when you start learning a foreign language, what you need to do basically, the most important things. And I tried to do this in another language, so that was a bit of fun. And I thought I'd make a second video, since I've got the webcam now. It seems to be working very well. And this one will be a little bit about a topic that's been on my mind, easy and difficult languages. And I think this is very interesting because I always get people asking this, and I always hear and see a lot of discussion on YouTube and everywhere with people who study languages and know about languages, but also people who don't, especially with people who don't. But even with people who do, I get this question, what's an easy language, what's a hard language, what's the hardest, what's the easiest? Oh, you're learning Hungarian, that must be really hard. I've heard it's really hard. And I think it's interesting because most of the times people don't know, and they hear what other people say and they believe it, or they just assume that it's difficult. Like they'll look at the writing of a language and see funny characters and things like that on top of the letters or a different alphabet, and automatically assume that it must be really difficult. And I get native speakers of Hungarian even telling me, oh, our language is terribly difficult. It's the hardest language in the world. I mean, I don't see how there can be such thing as the hardest language in the world anyway. And I don't know how a native speaker of Hungarian can know that their language is the hardest language, or a Chinese speaker that Chinese is the hardest language or easiest language or whatever. I just don't think that they know, because they haven't learned their native language as a second language. So I don't think that that's true, and I've been learning Hungarian for about 3 or 4 months now, and I really don't think it's difficult at all. It's quite logical. It's different. It's definitely different in structure, and I think that's another thing that makes people, when people see that something's really different from their own language, they automatically assume that it's probably a lot more challenging. So I don't think it really means anything if a language is hard or easy. People typically say, people who know about languages and who learn foreign languages, multiple languages, things like that, typically say that the languages closest to your own language are the easiest to learn. For example, if you're an native English speaker, the easiest languages are obviously the Germanic languages and the Latin or Romance languages. So, for example, Dutch is obviously very close to English and Scandinavian languages, and German, and Italian and Spanish and Romanian and French and Portuguese, and all these languages are supposedly the easiest languages because they are the closest related to English, and they share a lot of vocab with English, either because they're related or because they've come into because of loan words and cultural contact and things like that. English is a Germanic language, but it's actually taken a lot of words from Romance languages, so it's, there's a lot of common words in Italian and Spanish and French with English. And I think it is true to an extent, and they use the same alphabet, and I think it's true to an extent that they're easy at first, but I don't think that they're that easy. I mean, they're easy for you when you're starting out, and if you're a native English speaker, because there'll be a lot of familiar vocab with these languages and your language, so that'll make it a little bit easier and a bit more, make you feel a bit more comfortable with learning the language. I agree with that. So to a certain point, this will help you in learning these languages. However, Um, once you get to the intermediate point, I think that's the most challenging point, and I think it actually gets a lot harder then. And I don't think, for example, Italian or Spanish or German or Dutch or whatever, if you're learning these languages, you'll find, oh yeah, there's a lot of similar vocab. I'm going okay, but to master those languages takes many years. To become conversational is fine, it won't take you too long. But you're still going to be faced with the same challenges. I mean, people say these are the easiest languages, but I still don't see a lot of people speaking these easy languages that fluently anyway. Um, and they say, languages like Hungarian are hard, Russian is hard, Arabic is hard, Chinese is hard because they're a bit different. So they automatically assume that they're more difficult. I mean, yes, in some ways they are. Um, but I think also what you have to keep in mind, just because something's different doesn't mean that it's actually difficult. Hungarian and Finnish are supposed to be very difficult, but actually the grammar is actually quite simple, really. It's just that seems to be a lot of rules and a lot of case endings and things like that. But these case endings are quite simple. They're endings that you add onto the end of the word, and they don't really change much. They're quite predictable. And languages like Finnish and Hungarian don't have gender. They don't have masculine, feminine, and neutral or whatever. German does. Russian does. Italian and Spanish do. So you have to get used to that. And the endings, for example, in Russian can change. There can be so many endings because you have your case endings about location or object or whatever, plus it has to agree in gender and number. Whereas in Finnish and Hungarian, it doesn't have to agree in gender because there is no gender. So the endings have simple functions. So basically, a bit of technical talk there, but I think if a language is different, but once you get, every language has a logic, and once you understand this logic, you tap into this logic, you can definitely learn the language. The language becomes a lot easier. So that's the case with that. And then probably I'll have to make another video about language families, because I'm sure that a lot of people don't know about which languages are related to which, and they might be quite surprised to find out which ones are and which ones aren't. So sometimes, in answer to this question, sometimes a related language to yours is easy, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes a completely different language is hard, or sometimes it's easy. I mean, there's no one answer. It's a stupid question, and I think it just comes down to you wanting to learn the language. If you want to learn Hungarian, go and learn it. You've got reason to learn it. It's fine. It's not that hard. You'll get the hang of it, like anything else. And another thing to take into consideration is aspects of difficulty. For example, some languages have a more challenging pronunciation, like some Asian languages have a challenging pronunciation with tones and things like that, which you have to get used to, especially if you don't have that in your own language. But like they have challenging pronunciation or extremely complicated writing system. For example, Mandarin Chinese has no alphabet. You have a symbol for every word, I think. I'm not sure. But the grammar itself is actually is very, is simple in comparison to English. It's not very grammatical. It has what's called an analytical grammar, which in comparison to European languages is quite simple because you don't have conjugation of verbs, irregular verbs and things like that. Tenses, so there's no tenses in Chinese, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So past tense, present tense, future tense, there's none of that. And I think no plurals. So it actually may not be as hard as you think. I think you have to do it, and you have to just do it and find out for yourself. And also, it's not really a constructive thing or a helpful thing to say this language is very difficult. It's not going to really motivate you. If you're always thinking this is so hard, and you won't ever feel as though you're competent, and you won't have the confidence or that confidence, and you may not do so well. But you have to remember that every language is spoken by a human being, and there is no sound that we cannot reproduce from another language. We're all human beings, we all speak different languages, but none is so difficult that they cannot be learned. So I think, in conclusion, that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And if you learn a language, if you go about it the right way, starting from zero, learning in a natural method, I don't think it really matters. I don't think it really matters if it's hard or easy or complex grammar or different grammar or whatever, complex pronunciation. Don't think it really matters if you have the right approach. Every child in every country learns their own language with no problem, so I think it can be done. Also, I mentioned before aspects of language, so you have maybe a difficult pronunciation but an easy grammar, hard writing system, easy grammar, or difficult grammar system, complex grammar system with maybe very clear pronunciation, no strange sounds, no tones, things like that. You may have that as well. So you got to consider that too in aspects. I think Moses McCormick made a video a while ago about languages, difficult languages and easy languages in terms of aspect. And aspect is in easy pronunciation, hard grammar, or hard pronunciation and very easy grammar. So I think that's important as well. But at the end of the day, if you're doing the right things, if you're motivated, if you're interested and you're putting in the time, you'll get the hang of it. And I think it'll definitely come to you. If you've got the right exposure. And no language is that difficult at the end of the day. But all languages, it's contradictory because then none of that difficult, but all languages will require a lot of effort and a lot of time to master. So I just think that the statement, this language is the hardest language in the world, is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous statement, and I'm getting a bit sick of hearing it because I hear it about Hungarian all the time. Oh, it's the hardest language in the world, it's too hard, it's so complex, blah blah blah. And I've been doing it, and it's not the case. I've been doing it for about 4 months, and I'm already making a lot of progress. In some ways it's a lot easier than the languages that I know already. It's a lot simpler. So we have to remember to encourage people and not scare them away. I think though, if you go about learning a foreign language in the wrong way and teaching too much grammar too early, and someone having, for example, if you're learning at school or uni and you're given boring content and you have to learn all the grammar rules perfectly before you can even speak or whatever, things like that. I mean, that can make any language hard. It can definitely be the case. And just because a language is obscure or different to yours doesn't necessarily mean that it's difficult. It might be difficult, but not because other people say it is. So yes, I think I've gone on there a bit, repeated myself a little bit, but that was the main point. The point obviously is it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And I think I'm coming towards the end. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's it, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for your time.